you are able to turn around the progress of this marathon whenever there are the bright moments in the shadow. 516-620-3602. Thank you, those of you who are calling. Thank you so much. And during this interval, let's get another 15 or so calls. 516-620-3602. And it is an adventure of increasing happiness each day I come by our new studios here, Michael, and congratulations to you and everybody else who's constructing the physical plant and making it possible for us to broadcast as we land parachute by parachute into our great new quarters here at the North Academic Center at the City College, having moved from our old studios at 120 Wall Street. Thank you, thank you, thank you. 516-620-3602. And this is a revelation. And, you know, I speak about being a catalyst, and this is a catalytic, cinematic liberation, revelation. Heist. Who stole the American dream? It is right up to the minute. It was completed just a couple of months ago. And it's on the cutting edge of liberating the American dream and perhaps even resuscitating, if not the fact, the concept of democracy in America, when the Supreme Court rules that in this regard, corporations really are people and they have free speech rights and they can bribe whoever the hell they want, and they're about to make another decision. For those of you just joining us, the Supreme Court could create a system of legalized bribery in Washington. And as Fred Wertheimer says of Democracy 21, enormous stakes are at hand here on campaign finance and the Supreme Court, which is going to review a decision that limited it, according to the rules of the Federal Election Commission. He says if the Supreme Court strikes down the existing limits on the aggregate amount an individual can give to all federal candidates and party committees in a 2-year election cycle, the justices will create a system of legalized bribery in Washington. It would be a gold mine for big donors interested in buying government decisions and would wreak havoc on the interests of ordinary Americans. The case is McCutcheon v. FEC, McCutcheon versus the Federal Election Commission, and it's considered by the Supreme Court, and it's a challenge by Sean McCutcheon and the Republican National Committee to basically obviate the limits that have already been ratified by prior Supreme Court decisions. And the reversal would not only strike down the aggregate contribution limits enacted in 1974, remember Nixon and the dirty bribery that is now legal, but it would also eviscerate an essential anti-corruption provision enacted in 2002 and upheld by the Supreme Court in 2003 in McConnell v. FEC. That prohibits a federal office holder or candidate from soliciting contributions that do not comply with federal contribution limits. And what this means, the bottom line of it is that somebody can give up to $3 million or more per donor. And you know how they launder that and have family members say that they're giving money that was actually given to them, right? Well, I think it's about time we collectively and simultaneously knew this, huh? So, give us a call at 516-620-3602. There is one more segment that I'd like you to hear, but let's see. We have, let's see. Hisham, Grover, Molly, Chris, Wall, Rue, Dow, Scintilla, as best I can read. These are just some of the people who have been contributing during this attempt at education, elucidation, pedagogy, of trying to help bring about what they have made. They've hypnotized us into thinking that understanding economics is difficult. And that's how they put the darkness, the shadow on our consciousness. And do all those dirty things roaches do in the dark. Corporate roaches. We think there's another way. Give us a call at 516-620-3602 and get the film Heist, Who Stole the American Dream, and how we can get it back. And I'd like you just to consider there are other elements that you will have to peruse as you receive this brand new DVD, because I'd like to play the part about the free trade market and the outsourcing of American jobs, and they then go boo-hoo about, oh, we've lost so many American jobs and unemployment, blah, blah, blah. Well, I can't play that because, no, my brother, no, my sister, you got to get your own. Can't tell. No, the movie Heist, Who Stole the American Dream. But I do want to give you a sample of something very important here, and that is on the attack on people who have contributed so much to America and who are aging, who have paid into Social Security, who will need medical care that's being taken away through a fake cost of living increase that Obama set up for Social Security and other dirty tricks that are being done by both parties. This is from the film Heist. Give us a call. We're getting into the final stretch here. 516-620-3602. Get this movie.
U.S. Steel is getting out of the steel business, and they're getting out of this community. And they're saying, goodbye, we had enough, there's no more left, we squeezed the grape, we're going on to greener pastures.
We've seen the acceleration of the hollowing out of America as the most important and powerful industrial society on earth.
Since 1973, approximately 40 million good-paying American jobs with benefits have been shipped overseas or dismantled by corporations, boosting their own profits at working Americans' expense. Thanks to decades of policy shaped by corporate money, there was nothing to stop them.
There is this notion that this was only a Republican villainy, when in fact much of what happened during the 8 years of Bill Clinton.
We seek a new and more open global trading system, not for its own sake, but for our own sake.
I supported NAFTA then, and I supported NAFTA now. I still support NAFTA now for the same reason, or the same reasons. The main one is I, like most economists, generically favor trade liberalization because trade leads to gains on both sides.
As Jorge Castañeda, who was later finance minister of Mexico, once said, he said, NAFTA was an arrangement between the rich and powerful of all three countries, leaving ordinary people out.
What that really means in simple language is that corporations are able to...
So there is a tiny little sample. There is so much more about the outsourcing of jobs and the destruction of the labor movement in the United States. That's just a tiny sample of that. But here's what I really want you to hear, because it affects so many people. It is the theft of the already paid investment of retirees through Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. Please give us a call. Keep those calls coming, 516-620-3602, to support WBAI and get the film Heist, Who Stole the American Dream.
What they've done for the last 20 years is destroy the ability of people who worked hard and played by the rules to have decent retirements.
Big business was not satisfied with just outsourcing jobs and getting huge tax breaks to increase their profits. Corporations also set their sights on eliminating guaranteed pensions.
Common stock. Do I own any? I don't even know what they are.
In the 1950s, stock gets marketed like another consumer item. At the same time, pension funds are starting to change. Why, for example, should a company have to put away that kind of money as a liability to pay off its retired workers, when instead they could take some out of the paycheck every week and then make you go invest it yourself? And that's what they did.
So why not put your money to work?
Put my money to work?
That's right, Mr. Finchley. You can own a share of American business.
You know, there's a joke that compensation executives tell each other. What's a four-letter word that starts with an F, ends with a K, and stands for screw your workers? 401k. 401ks are a subtle kind of pay cut, and they're bad economics. Defined benefit pension plans were on top of your salary.
That meant you worked for a company for 30 years or so, you retired, you knew exactly how much money was going to get paid out of the pension because the company kept this pension fund and it kept enough money in it to pay you out.
Under a 401k plan, you have to save money out of your paycheck, so you have less money. The company may give you a match, but these plans typically save a company 50% or more in the plan. assume all the risks of investing your money. If the average person could manage investments, then why in the world would they pay the gigantic salaries that they do on Wall Street?
Adjusted for inflation in the last decade, retirement savings invested in 401k plans lost nearly a third of their value. Today, state governments are beginning to shift public worker pensions to 401k plans.
Some of the horrible crimes against the rights of people who have faithfully supported their Social Security payments that have been risen, while at the same time corporate and wealthy tax rates have been diminished. This is WBAI 5 o'clock Shadow. I'm Robert Knight here with Michael G. Haskins. And as we come to the top of this hour, I'd like to encourage another dozen of you to really, I feel that we're turning things around today, Michael. I feel that this is a good day. Each time we come in, fear is my co-pilot, because I want you to support this radio station. You're really investing in our broadcast of 2014 and 15 and 2030. So please give us a call and get this film. It is a dangerous film. It is called Heist: Who Stole the American Dream and How Do We Get It Back? And it has not only analytic, but also prescriptive approaches to this problem. And you will see when you get this, the list of organizations that are engaged in a public campaign to decry the false rhetoric of the bipartisan conspiracy of corporate payoffs. 516-620-3602 is the number, and we need you to join us now. I think there are quite a few people over at our call center at 516-620-3602, and we're very happy with the response so far, and I'd like to add just another couple or a few $1,000s to the coffers and tally, or for you to add it, with a $100 pledge for the DVD Heist, with special features including community organizing. 516-620-3602. And as we approach the top of the hour, I'd like to add something by a friend of mine, an interlocutor who is a great musician, also the composer of a song called Believed to Be Linked to Al-Qaeda, Timothy Janikos, and we salute you and ask you to keep calling 516-620-3602, 516-620-3602, as Timothy Janikos joins in with an original composition that is consistent with our theme today. It is called Austerity Psychosis.
The rich money men are pulling the strings to make so the banksters can cling to their power. A so-called debt, a real Ponzi scheme, so easily redeemed. Get rid of the banks that created Don't be fooled by the man or his curtains. Mr. Jennings was right, though he gave up the fight. If the people unite, the money men fall by the
Timothy Janikos, Austerity Psychosis. And that concludes our special presentation today on 5 o'clock Shadow with Michael G. Haskins. I'm Robert Knight, and welcome your communications with an email to theshadow@wbai.org, or you can write us here at 160 Convent, WBAI at CCNY at 160 Convent, New York 10031. And thank you, everybody, for your generous donations today. You are bright and a brilliant soul. Thank you.
And all profiteers that go with it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well done, Robert Knight. Well done, listeners. Well done, listeners. That is the constant here. That's the constant at WBAI, is the listener's response. Every time we come to you to ask for your support, you always come through, and we thank you so very, very much. There's still time. You know, in that, as the song was playing, 3 more calls came in. So there's time for you. There is room for you to call in with your pledges of support right now for 5 o'clock Shadow with Robert Knight. This is expanded edition of 5 o'clock Shadow with Robert Knight. 516-620-3602. Just ask for Heist. It's a $100 tax-deductible contribution to WBAI. Come on now, folks. We have 30 seconds, and then the news will be coming up. We'll be bringing you the WBAI Evening News. Thank you so much. 516-620-3602. Let me look real quick and see if another call is coming in. Let me look. Hold on, folks. Hold on. Is there another call? Yes, there's another call. I cannot believe this. Look at that. Another call has come in right now at 5:59. So somebody hit it before we get to 6 o'clock. Somebody hit it one more time before 6 p.m. 516-620-3602. You can pledge using the major credit cards to WBAI. Do so right now. We're waiting for your call to come in at 516-620-3602. Well done. Well done, folks. That's what we need to do, and that's what we all need to do, to speak to our listeners, to get them to support this radio station, and we know that they will. Thank you all very, very much. It's 6 p.m. in New York. Please stay tuned for a report of some of the day's events with the WBAI News team.
Good evening. In the news tonight, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie delivers his budget address. At this hour, supporters for justice for Trayvon Martin are rallying in Union Square on the first anniversary of his shooting death. The U.S. Supreme Court rules against a challenge to unchecked surveillance in the FISA Amendment of 2008. And the group against New York University expansion plans scores a small victory in court today. With these and other stories, I'm Rebecca Miles in New York, and this is the news for Tuesday, February the 26th, 2013. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is proposing a $32.9 billion budget that allows more poor people to enroll in Medicaid and increases public school aid but defers property tax rebates for 3 months. Christie's budget for the fiscal year starts July 1st. and contains no surprises. The proposal comes as the state rebounds from Hurricane Sandy, the worst natural disaster in the state's history. Christie's budget counts on federal funding to stimulate the state's still sluggish economy and help coastal communities rebuild. The budget also adds nearly $100 million to public education and expands the Medicaid rolls by $300,000 by allowing the federal government to take over costs. However, many homeowners expecting property tax rebates in May will have to wait. Seniors, the disabled and low-income homeowners will see them in August. The governor is seeking re-election this year and is counting on billions of dollars in federal Sandy relief funding to boost construction jobs and help communities that lost part of their tax when homes were destroyed and businesses closed. Christie's proposed budget could be thrown into turmoil by the end of the week, to the peril of the state's property holders if President Barack Obama and Congress fail to strike a deal on looming federal budget cuts. The first $1.8 billion in Sandy aid is due in April, but New Jersey could see $100 million less than expected unless there's a deal in Washington to eliminate federal cuts set to take effect Friday. Preschool classes and regional airports could also be shuttered. The Division of Local Government Services estimates that 25 municipalities lost at least 5% of their tax base to Sandy. The Republican governor has told residents of hard-hit towns whose homes survived the storm to expect to pay higher property taxes, but that could be a bitter pill for New Jerseyans recovering from Sandy. State residents already pay the highest property taxes in the country, averaging $7,870 per household. The U.S. Supreme Court today, in a 5-4 vote along ideological grounds, ruled against a group of American lawyers, journalists and organizations who challenged the 2008 expansion of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. The 2008 amendment allows the government to obtain from a secret court broad, year-long intercept orders, raising the prospect that phone calls and emails between those foreign targets and innocent Americans in the U.S. would be swept under the umbrella of surveillance. The Supreme Court today was not considering the constitutionality of the expansion, only whether lawyers could file a lawsuit to challenge it in federal court. Justice Samuel Alito said the FISA expansion merely authorizes but does not mandate or direct the government monitoring. Because of that, he said, respondents' allegations are necessarily conjectural. Similarly put, respondents can only speculate as to how the Attorney General or the Director of the National Intelligence will exercise their discretion in determining which communications to target. However, Jamil Jaffer, the Deputy Legal Director for American Civil Liberties Union, who argued the case in court, said, quote, "This ruling insulates the statute from meaningful judicial review and leaves Americans' privacy rights to the mercy of the political branches. This theory is foreign to the Constitution and inconsistent with fundamental democratic values." At this time, Trayvon Martin's family is marking the first anniversary of his shooting death with a candlelight vigil at Union Square in New York City. Martin's parents, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, are scheduled to take part in the vigil, along with their attorneys and others. A moment of silence is scheduled for 7:17 p.m. The 17-year-old unarmed black teenager was killed in Sanford, Florida, by a neighborhood leader, George Zimmerman, after the two got into a confrontation. It took weeks before Zimmerman was arrested, and he has claimed he was acting in self-defense. The shooting death of Trayvon Martin set off a national outcry over issues of race as well as stand-your-ground laws. WBAI's Linda Perry spoke with Michael Skolnick, who's the political director to hip-hop mogul Russell Simmons and is on the board of directors for the Trayvon Martin Foundation.
It's been a very difficult year for the family especially. I've grown very close to the mom and dad and to the brother of Trayvon. I was with them last night for dinner here in New York. They're here today. This is a tough day for them. I think, however, since Trayvon, we've had a shift of consciousness in this nation. Prior to that, so many young black and brown children were being killed in this country, and we never even knew their names. The past year, at least, we're beginning to understand that the value of a young black man's life is equal to the value of any American's life. And so we had Trayvon Martin, who sadly passed away a year ago. Jordan Davis, who was killed in Jacksonville, Florida in November, and Hadia Pendleton, who was killed in Chicago, and the parents of Hadia sitting next to the First Lady of the United States of America, the State of the Union address, certainly sent a message that these young people are equal and the pain and suffering of their families is equal. So we are experiencing tremendous growing pains in this country. I think we're progressing forward. But certainly, it's painful. It's painful to watch any parent bury their child, and to watch any young person have to grieve over the loss of one of their own. And I'm sure your listeners know better than I do, because they're probably much more smart or much more intelligent than I am. But we have a horrible sickness in this country of infatuation with guns. And I still can't get over the idea of why someone feels that they need a gun to solve a problem. That, whether it's George Zimmerman carrying a gun with him in his car and riding around his neighborhood looking for somebody who in his mind was robbing a house, never been proven, no police report, no evidence, or whether it's an 18-year-old child shooting a 15-year-old girl in her back in a park in Chicago, I still personally just don't understand how someone thinks they can pull a trigger and end a life and that will solve a problem. So the notion to support George Zimmerman and his right to carry a weapon, or his right to use a weapon against an unarmed teenager, is deeply concerning. As optimistic as I am, I believe it's still sort of factions of this country that are holding on to ideals that are antiquated, that are behind us, that certainly most young people in this country don't relate to. But there are many in this country who want to hold on to, whatever sort of last throngs of power they feel they can take, and this country's going in a different direction.
Also, I think that people don't realize how fragile life really is.
That's an excellent point. One bullet killed a 17-year-old kid. That's it. And it's not that big of a bullet. A small little bullet, right, goes to the heart and it's over. And I know as an expected father, I can certainly sympathize with many parents as my child comes in a couple of weeks. The fear of something happening to your child, and then one bullet in one night when a kid's just walking home from the store to go to his house to watch a basketball game, it's over. That's what really pains me is there's a horrible stereotype of families that are affected by gun violence as being bad, or being dysfunctional, or being not good parents. They didn't raise their children right, and that's why their child got involved in a violent altercation. This family, Jordan Davis's family, Darian Albert's family, Kevin Miller's family, Aiyana Jones's family, all these young people that have been killed in this country by guns, they're amazing people. To watch Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin carry themselves with grace and dignity and compassion when their son was murdered is remarkable. Amadou's mother is a remarkable human being. Unbelievable human being. The forgiveness that she has shown to a police force that shot her son 41 times. We think of Emmett Till's mother, and I get goosebumps thinking of how Noah Posner, his mother, a 6-year-old child in Newtown, Connecticut, forced the governor of Connecticut, Malley, to look at her son's body, to show how brutalized her child was. She had, in her Jewish faith, had wanted to put 2 stones in his hand, and she put one stone in one hand, and she wanted to put the other stone in the left hand. There was no left hand to put the stone in. This is not little children who are angelic going to heaven. These are kids who have been brutalized. Trayvon Martin was shot through his chest. Amadou Diallo was shot 41 times. He was 23 years old. These are children. So we fight every single day. As I know this is the radio, and so you can't see me, but I'm a white American who was born and raised in this town, and as a white person in this country, it is our duty to fight for the rights of others that we take for granted for ourselves. And so if a young black man cannot walk through his neighborhood in Sanford, Florida, in Sacramento, California, or in Brooklyn, New York, it's our job for those who have those rights to fight for the rights of others.
That was Linda Perry speaking with Michael Skolnick, who's political director to Russell Simmons and is on the board of directors of the Trayvon Martin Foundation. Today, New York University faculty, community leaders and Greenwich Village residents were in New York State Supreme Court for a hearing over a lawsuit filed against New York City and state agencies for what they allege is the illegal approval of New York University's 2031 expansion plan. The plan would lead to the building of several multi-story tower blocks in a congested part of Greenwich Village where many New York University faculty live, threatening to disrupt their lives with years of construction and the lives of other residents, and they argue remove the last remaining vestiges of open green space. The case argues the city's planning commission and the city council approved a plan that is unnecessary and is a health hazard. On Friday, former New York Parks Department Commissioner Henry Stern, in an affidavit, said New York University illegally took over 4 protected parkland areas with the city's approval, but in doing so violated state law. In court today, the judge agreed to hear arguments for discovery on the park alienation issue. Joining supporters of the anti-sexism plan were the actor Matthew Broderick and writer Kenneth Lonergan. The Radical Hip Hop Library will open shortly in the South Bronx. The Rebel Diaz Arts Collective has paired with the Lower East Side radical bookstore Blue Stockings to launch the project in a former candy factory by the Bruckner Expressway. The project will be named the Richie Perez Radical Library in honor of the prominent teacher and legendary activist of the South Bronx who passed away in 2004. Perez was a member of the Young Lords and co-founded the National Congress for Puerto Rican Rights. A mentor to many young people, Perez also founded the Justice Committee, working with families of kids killed by the NYPD, and said his wife, Martha Larino, he was a great fan of hip-hop. So far, the Hip-Hop Collective and Blue Stockings have collected over 300 books on radical politics, feminism, Latino and black history, and of course, hip-hop. But how will this multimedia generation embrace the written word? WBAI's Sally O'Brien first put that question to Rod Stars of the Rebel Diaz Arts Collective.
Nowadays, with all the distractions of television, social media, iPhones, and all these other gadgets, the actual relationship between a person and a book is like decreasing. And we think a big reason for that is a lot of times that young people are not reflected in the books that are given to them in school. You know, when they're reading about Christopher Columbus and George Washington and Abe Lincoln, you're not seeing yourself. Young people of color are not seeing themselves reflected in those stories. Now, that doesn't mean their history isn't represented in books. So the reason for having a radical library is folks learn about the Black Panther Party and Malcolm X and read W.B. Du Bois, read, Piri Thomas Down These Mean Streets, and books that are going to impact their lives. And we say that because we, as individuals, have been impacted by great books. I'm an MC. You know, I'm a part of a hip-hop group, and I tell people all the time, the young people, like, the more you read, the iller you'll be as an MC. The more you read, the more vocabulary that you'll have access to, the more themes that you'll be able to talk about in your music.
What I wanted to add is that there was a study made in terms of the usage of the libraries, and the Bronx happens to have one of the highest usage of libraries. It tells us how hungry our young people are for knowledge, and creating this radical library is kind of using that hunger and feeding off that energy of young people wanting to get information and creating a space that is able to give access to information that is relevant to them. Because the problem is not whether young kids are not interested or they don't care. I don't think that's the actual reason why we have such high rates of people dropping out of high school, is that, like Rod was saying, is the fact that there is no relevancy to what they're reading. The history that they're being taught is not history that is relevant to their own stories. And so we want to create a space that is based and focused on the empowerment of our young people, where they could see themselves, where they could see their stories, and at some point be so motivated that they write their own stories because it's valid, because it's powerful, because it'll impact other lives. So I feel like the creation of this space is a powerful move and is a courageous move that will encourage a lot of young people to look for their stories in the narratives of people of color, but also find their own voice and write their own stories and tell their own stories. And I think that's very powerful.
Create new books.
Yeah.
One of the main reasons why I think it's important that we're collaborating as Blue Stockings and collaborating with the Rebel Diaz Arts Collective is because hip-hop as a culture is inherently curious. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. Most musical genres do not exist in a vacuum. So when young MCs and the youth start reading or writing, they become curious as to the origins of where the music is. Where did the music evolve from? And I feel that they'll get to a certain point in the late 70s with the introduction of Africa Bambaataa and DJ Kool Herc, where it seems to, if music did exist in a vacuum, that history would just end. It would just be isolated. Whereas with the advent of this library, the really intent of this library would be to connect histories of resistance and struggle to the beginning of hip-hop, so that youth understand this lifestyle choice, this culture that they're interacting with does not exist purely as an aesthetic venture, that there's a deep historical relevance to the music that they're doing. And just because Khalil Gibran did not believe himself to be a hip-hop artist because that language did not exist, I feel that our youth can appropriate, and hip-hop can appropriate, young writers. And like we've been talking about in the space intentionally for almost a full year now, it's not necessarily that the youth are incapable of interacting with, it's just that their relationship to knowledge is hyper-institutionalized. And with increased rates of mass incarceration, youth want nothing to do with any sort of institutionalization. So we're trying to create a really intentional resource where youth can come in and have, again, an intentional relationship to their own histories, to the creation of knowledge, so that when we're taking steps forward, it's not bland, whitewashed textbooks that they're interacting with, but like Claudia said, the textbooks that we create ourselves.
Speaking there were Rod Stars and Claudia de la Cruz of the Rebel Diaz Arts Collective and Sky Cohen of Blue Stockings Bookstore, organisers of the Richie Perez Radical Library. Speaking with WBAI's Sally O'Brien. For more information, listeners can log on to www.rdacbx.org. That's www.rdacbx.org. And that's our abbreviated newscast for Tuesday, February the 26th, 2013. We're in the midst of constructing a newsroom in a temporary location, and we expect to bring you a full newscast in the coming days. The news was produced in New York with Sally O'Brien, Linda Perry, Desi K. Robinson and Jose Santiago. I'm Rebecca Miles for the WBAI Evening News in New York.
I'm Nell Abram with FSRN Headlines. One of two teenage boys critically injured yesterday during clashes in the West Bank is reportedly near death today. According to the Palestine News Network, Odai Sarhan was shot in the head by Israeli troops. Violence erupted during a funeral march for Arafat Jaradat, the married father of two children, with a third on the way. Jaradat died Saturday while in Israeli detention. The United Nations has called for an investigation into his death. Tensions in the region continue to escalate. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade has claimed responsibility for a cross-border rocket fired from Gaza this morning. While many media outlets called the rocket the first violation of a ceasefire brokered last November, Palestinian health officials say Israel has violated the ceasefire nearly 100 times. Last month, Hamas spokesperson Ahad al-Hussein addressed the issue.
These violations are continuous. They actually injured many people, and sometimes they killed some Palestinian people.
8 more Palestinians detained in Israeli jails have joined ongoing hunger strikes. According to prisoner advocates, they joined Samar al-Asawi and 3 others who have been on prolonged hunger strikes protesting their imprisonment. A state university in central Nigeria is closed today after military forces shot dead 3 students during a protest yesterday. Sam Olukoya reports from Lagos.
Hospital sources said 9 other students sustained gunshot wounds during the demonstration against poor living conditions at the Nasarawa State University in Kefi. The students had barricaded a highway to protest lack of water and electricity on their campus when armed soldiers moved in to quell the rally. Nigerian human rights groups condemned the use of excessive force to repress a peaceful protest by unarmed students. The human rights groups also called for an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the deployment of armed soldiers. Following the shootings, the state government ordered the university to shut down. The substandard living conditions on the campus reflect the state of facilities at government-owned universities throughout Nigeria. Most of the country's public schools are also in poor condition due to the widespread corruption under which public funds meant to maintain facilities end up in private pockets. Sam Olukoya, FSRN, Lagos.
Coal miners in Colombia are in the 3rd week of a strike. About 5,000 workers at an enormous open-pit coal mine called Cerrejón are calling for higher wages and better health care. The site is owned by a joint venture of mining giants, Anglo-American, BHP Billington, and Xstrata. Union Health Secretary Jose Brito told Al Jazeera that at least 700 workers at the mine suffer from serious work-related illnesses.
Workers are paying a very high price, and we demand the company conforms to the international regulations.
But company officials say that the incidence of work-related illness at Cerrejón is lower than at any other mine company. Public protests last week in poverty-stricken La Guajira department, where Cerrejón is located, slammed both the company and the local government, the former for not paying its fair share of taxes, and the latter for misappropriating those taxes they do receive. Talks stalled last week. Negotiators are now discussing a framework to restart mediation. Today marks 1 year since unarmed Trayvon Martin was shot by a neighborhood watch volunteer while walking home from a market in Sanford, Florida. George Zimmerman faces second-degree murder charges in the case and pleaded not guilty on the basis of Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground law. His trial is expected to begin in June. The law allows individuals to use deadly force in self-defense. Following Martin's death, a state task force reviewed the law. On Friday, they released their report, which says the law should not be overturned. But the panel did recommend that the law be updated to limit the role of neighborhood watch members to observing events and not intervening. Martin's parents will attend a candlelight vigil in his memory in New York City this evening. A slew of Republicans have signed a front-of-the-court legal brief that argues gay couples have the right to marry. The brief will be filed this week at the U.S. Supreme Court in support of a case that seeks to overturn California's ban on gay marriage. The signatures include influential conservatives, some of whom served in former President George W. Bush's administration. Among the signatories are former New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman, former Prop 8 supporter and California gubernatorial candidate Meg Whitman, and 2 Republican members of Congress, Florida's Ileana Ros-Lehtinen and Richard Hanna of New York. The High Court will hear the Prop 8 challenge in March, along with a challenge to the 1996 Federal Defense of Marriage Act. And 18 Republicans crossed the aisle today and voted to end the Senate filibuster, blocking a vote on President Obama's nominee for Pentagon chief. A former Republican senator from Nebraska, Chuck Hagel, is expected to win the nomination in a full Senate vote late this afternoon.
4 months on, homes and businesses in many of New York City's outlying areas remain abandoned since Superstorm Sandy swept along the eastern seaboard. Thousands of people remain displaced. Residents of Far Rockaway, Queens, one of the neighborhoods struck hardest, are working not just to recover from the storm, but also from the long-running effects of poverty they say were prevalent before Sandy arrived. FSRN's Peter Rue has more.
Nearly 30% of homes in the Rockaways still lack heat, and almost 10% are without electricity, according to the advocacy group New York Communities for Change. Alongside ongoing rebuilding and cleanup projects, attempts at forging a long-term recovery are also underway. Members of Occupy Sandy, together with local residents, are pressing forward with plans to build worker-run enterprises and rejuvenate the tattered neighborhood. On Cornega Avenue in Far Rockaway, dozens of people packed into the upstairs of Church of the Prophecy last weekend to discuss worker-owned cooperatives. Aside from housing the church, the aluminum-paneled residential unit has doubled as a base of operations for organizers with Occupy Sandy since the storm swept the East Coast last October.
He's a cabinet maker, and I work in a upholstery shop, so that's what we do.
Olga Lazama and her husband Carlos were among the crowd who came to the community meeting, eager to find out how to start a co-op with their friends and neighbors. Lazama says she makes $100 a day and estimates her employer pockets $500 off of each piece of furniture that she upholsters.
It hurts my feelings, in my pockets, because my job, my efforts, and my everything goes to them.
Lazama says she and her husband would like to start a cooperative enterprise that manufactures affordable furniture and cabinets, something she says the neighborhood sorely needs.
We go to stores, buy cheap, very cheap furniture, cabinets, and stuff. And we're wasting our money, and we're throwing away our money, and then we go the next 2 months. The cabinet is not good anymore, so we have to go buy it again. So that's what they like. So that's what we need in this community. Our people need good stuff.
Some plans are farther along than others. Organizers with Occupy Sandy say one group has already begun meeting with aspirations to start a bakery. Other plans for a child care center, a scrap metal company, and the Lazama's home design business are still in their brainstorming stages. Working World is lending a hand. The nonprofit provides advice and channels funds through zero-debt loans to workers looking to form their own democratic workplaces.
Cooperatives is workers controlling capital instead of capital controlling workers.
Brendan Martin helped form the organization about 8 years ago in Argentina.
It's a big, it's not just like, hey, some people getting along. It's about reorganizing the economy around who's really in control and who really owns. And there's never a bad time to do that. Crises can represent a particularly good time. It's sort of like the stupid old adage, like necessity is the mother of invention. It helps people to realize, that something needs to change when there's a crisis.
A small percentage of the initial profits generated through Working World seed money goes towards funding new co-ops, creating what Martin calls an ecology of funding. From Argentina, the group helped spread the model to other parts of Latin America, to austerity-rattled Greece, and now to Far Rockaway. The Lazamas listened to Martin on Sunday and were intrigued. Though they themselves were mostly spared by the storm, they spy a way to collectively keep wealth within their community and an opportunity to provide a much-needed service for their neighbors who live closer to the sea.
We could go there, build whatever, a small kitchen or whatever they need, because a lot of the bungalows there's no kitchens, no house. The house went like nothing. So they have nothing. So why not?
Activists say if they can get co-ops off the ground in the Rockaways, it will help export the model citywide. One step further, they say, toward their vision of a people-powered recovery in an economy based upon solidarity. Peter Rue, FSRN, Far Rockaway, Queens.
For FSRN from Tampa, Florida, I'm Nell Abram.
The weakest of all political demands is, give me something to vote for.
I'm occupying Wall Street because if you're not outraged, then you're not paying attention.
Of the economy.
I care deeply about what's happening to the country.
People are losing their homes. I'm unemployed. I'm homeless.
My retirement literally embezzled.
Corporate banking behemoths rob the American people.
That ain't right, man.
Stand up and say, this is unacceptable and we're not going to take it anymore.
This country needs an enema. Well, the world needs an enema.
Hi, this is Eve Silber with Occupy Wall Street Radio. I'm here with a guest who occupies Wall Street as well, Samumba Sabukwe. Welcome to the show.
Hello, glad to be here.
So you have been involved with Occupy Wall Street for a while, and even went so far as to kind of establish a group out of Occupy Wall Street called Occu Evolve. Tell me about your very first involvement with Occupy Wall Street. When was that?
October the 17th. I came, was originally a part of the outreach group of Occupy Wall Street. I just came by the park one day, walking by, I saw that they had food. I was hungry that day, and I met someone from outreach, a pretty girl named Carla Hartley, and she was like, Kara Hartley, and she was like, come to our meeting tonight.
I know Kara,
yeah, and she was like, come to our meeting tonight, and I was like, is there going to be more like you there? And she was like, yeah, so I just came, and I was just immediately taken because I was already kind of, interested in social justice, and it was just a group that really seemed to speak to me, specifically the outreach group.
So they were beautiful and they fed you.
Yes. It was a double win.
Besides that, you were already in issues of social justice?
Yes, I was. Well, at the time, I was actually a homeless individual. I was actually living in a shelter, and I was already interested. I had gotten some emails about the protests on Occupy Wall Street. I had heard about it in the media, but I was dealing with life and death survival issues trying to come out of the shelter. I had a couple jobs that were just starting, so I wasn't able to really be a part of the movement like I wanted to, but I have been in social movements before.
Did you come and live in the park?
No, I never lived there because I still had a bed in the shelter, so
you didn't want to lose that.
I didn't want to lose it, so I had to be back every night by like 10 o'clock. And then when my job started, I had a excuse to come in late, but then, some of those excuses started to run out, and eventually I couldn't stay at the shelter. But I never stayed at the park, and I did work at the office when we had an office at 52 Broadway, but I never slept in the office.
And
at the park. Sorry.
At the park.
Yeah.
Did you sleep in the office?
Never slept in the office either. It was just another interview.
There was a homeless community or a community of people who lived outside who did find a place in the park and contributed a lot.
Yes.
There's still a lot of people in this movement living outside.
Yes.
I wrote a letter after the eviction to the mayor. It actually aired on this radio station as well. And I said, Dear Mayor Bloomberg, who will feed your homeless tonight? Because we were feeding quite a few people. Is that the kind of thing, that kind of activity that attracted you, or did you recognize Occupy as something different? Was it special? Was it unique to you at that time?
I thought it was unique. I thought it was special, different, because they weren't just like a protest movement of people camping out in the park. They were actually talking about real social issues from the, the collapse of the economy in 2008. And the fact that they were changing the conversation. They were talking not just about just what we would blandly call social justice, but they were talking about capitalism. And they were talking about a lot of issues that were affecting a lot of people. And that whole 99% moniker versus the 1% really kind of awakened me.
And what did you first start to do with the movement at that time?
Originally, I was in the outreach group, and most of my activity was to go to other occupies around the city. We had about 12 or 13 at that point, and they needed a person of color to go to those occupies so they can show them that this movement isn't just, young white kids down at the park. And I really got addicted at that point. Really, and I don't know if addicted is the right word, but I really enjoyed going to different community occupies, particularly Occupy the Bronx, because my shelter was actually in the Bronx. And I had lived in Harlem before I went into the shelter, so I worked with every Occupy in the city at the time. So it just really became my, I don't want to say my job, but kind of my assignment or whatnot. And I eventually got called the ambassador and the emissary of working with different occupies. And I was doing it. A lot of reasons, reason why I was doing that is because really nobody else was stepping up.
Yeah.
And it needed to be done. And then some aspects of Occupy Wall Street I couldn't really relate to, and I didn't really understand. So I always felt it was better for me to organize in the community.
I want to know a little bit about Occupy the Bronx. Is that something that's still going on? Would really like to follow up and find out about what elements of Occupy Wall Street didn't work for you or didn't resonate or that you didn't understand, as you said.
Well, Occupy the Bronx no longer exists. It in name. It's now called Take Back the Bronx.
Okay.
And we're actually doing an action with them tomorrow to serve an eviction notice to a slumlord who lives in a mansion somewhere on National Drive in Brooklyn. And so they still exist. They deal a lot with issues of housing, but more issues with police brutality. After the murder of Ramali Graham, around this time last year, they organized and started fighting against the injustice of what the police do to young men, and particularly people of color in this city.
This was a group that formed because Occupy existed and would not have formed otherwise, or did it already have some version of it?
No, I think it formed as a offshoot or because of inspired by Occupy Wall Street.
That's great.
Yes. And
that's a good thing.
Yeah, and they had some issues with Occupy Wall Street that I'm still not very clear on, like why. Like I can understand some of the consternation, the way that Occupy was portrayed, and maybe some of them came down to the party, they didn't like what they saw. However, to change your name to Take Back the Bronx, I've always had an issue with that, because I told them, like, you guys never had the Bronx to really take back, like, if anything. And they could have formed their Occupy or their group in ways that would have fit their community instead of changing the name, changing the focus. And eventually they stopped having assemblies, they stopped meeting, and they started doing more cop watch and direct actions, which was cool, but really, like, to organize. We had some issues with them. However, they're very active, still very active in the community, and, we try to support them as
and
much
they're
as
the
we can.
lasting result of the thing that was Occupy Wall Street.
Yes.
That is Occupy Wall Street.
Yes.
You talked about that you had some things you didn't understand. Were they similar to what issues that Occupy the Bronx had with Occupy, or different? And do you want to talk about those?
Yeah. Well, I guess their consternation had to do a lot, I feel, more with imagery rather than their relationship with Occupy, because I don't know to whatever extent they were actually dealing with directly with Occupy Wall Street. And we had people from Occupy Wall Street that used to go up to the Bronx, and they would give them a version of the struggle and social justice that maybe didn't rub them the right way.
Okay.
And maybe, I think the issue, it wasn't just with race or class, but those definitely had overlays. I think more of the postmodern, maybe anarchist kind of leanings of Occupy, they felt didn't really fit into their idea or their what would work for their community. And I've had the same sort of ideas, like, between revolution and reform, you have to find a balance, because you have to talk about jobs, you have to talk about housing, you have to talk about these issues that affect people on a day-to-day basis. And in some cases, or sometimes many cases, Occupy Wall Street doesn't always speak to those specific issues. We deal more with at Occupy Wall Street direct action, social justice, the economic system, the environment, and all those things are really true. But the meat and potatoes issues of, like, where am I going to sleep tonight, and what I'm going to eat, and how I'm going to feed my children, sometimes that gets lost in some of the rhetoric that comes from some people in the Occupy movement that don't quite understand what people are going through on a grassroots level.
And so at some point you started a group called Occu Evolving.
Yes.
Or Occu Evolve.
Yes, Occu Evolve.
I like it as a verb, evolving.
Yeah, Occu Evolving is the name that I use on Facebook.
Talk about that. When did it start, and how does it function for you?
Interesting. Well, we're coming up on our anniversary. February 24th will make it a year. We started because we had questions. We didn't start this group because we wanted a group, really. We had issues like, why weren't we doing more outreach to the communities? Why weren't we coordinating more with the local occupiers around a variety of issues? And, like, we formed, like, our first meeting was February 24th, Black History Month. Why weren't we talking more about Black history? We had, like, all of these questions, like, how come, the movement doesn't talk more about other peoples and other countries that have struggled? We felt like we were always, like, being marginalized and getting one version of things. And, like, the structure of, like, leaderlessness and horizontalism and a lot of these things, just from those of us that have been organizing, like, for years in our communities, like, kind of just struck us as kind of ineffective.
And there is a tyranny in horizontalism.
Yes, there is a tyranny, and the biggest issue among many is that a lot of times nothing gets done. Nobody takes responsibility. That was our biggest issue, like collective and personal responsibility. Everybody doesn't have the same skill set, skill levels, same experiences.
That's right.
And so you should form organizations and movements around people that know what they're doing. And those people should train other people, don't get me wrong. So it's just a lot about this whole horizontal, total inclusiveness that rubbed a lot of us the wrong way.
That caused, you felt a lot of time to be wasted, and these are people, you were trying to engage people who didn't have endless hours.
Yes.
Was that part of it for you?
Yeah, that was definitely a big part of it, to have these endless hours of meetings and have meetings when people weren't available in the middle of the day. That marginalized a lot of people. I also think that we had this big jobs bill, I think that came up in front of the General Assembly in either October or November, that didn't pass the Assembly. I think the vote was 34-16. And of course you needed 90%, modified consensus. And that jobs bill was I think it was like a public works kind of thing for the city. And when they blocked it and it didn't go through, that pushed a lot of working class, poor people away from the movement. And it seemed to just kind of go downhill, and we had assemblies, general assemblies where we had some fights break out and a lot of drama going on. And that further pushed people away, but there was something inside of this movement, even with the troubles and the issues that we had, that, was still very potent, still very, very effective. Even, a couple days after we got, kicked out of the park, we had our biggest action since, November 17th, where we had all the assemblies and we had the unions, and, they say 30 to 50,000 people out there for a day of action at Foley Square. And I always felt like the tactics or the energy and the direction of Occupy Wall Street, by identifying the 1% in corporate power, imperialism, capitalism as the problem, resonated. And I still feel like, the whole question of us occupying not only public space, but occupying our minds, occupying the thought of what it really means to be free, what it really means to be a community, what it really means to be, for people to be in power, still resonates. And so that's why I'm still in the movement. I just felt, me and others felt like it was time for the movement to truly evolve, to truly not just organize around May Day or S17 or special events, but to organize every day with as many groups as possible.
So Evolve is a group that kind of also was born out of Occupy Wall Street, born and named by you and some others.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out, because we lost the first month or two of notes or minutes. We never got them, but I believe it was Jack Rabbit of Interoccupy who came up with the name.
It's a great name.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we never formed, it was interesting, we never formed it to be another Peoples of Color caucus or anything like that. It was just we want the movement to evolve, but eventually the questions that we were raising, we brought more people and more women, more poor people, more people of color into the movement. And it was just for us to move forward, this movement has to represent, the city. The city is mostly women and people of color and LGBTQ people.
Yes.
And, if the movement doesn't
people
represent
have been engaged in this struggle in
for a long time.
For longer than Occupy.
Yes.
Occupy, I encountered this a lot of people from out of town who didn't recognize this city as a capital of social justice, right? And you've been here all along thinking and working on these matters. And you had a way to connect the movement to people, and nothing was going to stop you, was it? Yeah,
nothing was going to stop me. I always felt even with the issues that I raised, there's so much there's a greatness to Occupy, and that in the name, when some people have problems with the name, there's Occupy, they consider that with Palestine is occupied, or we have our communities are occupied by the police. But I always felt like Occupy was something when the people occupy it, that means they control it. So that was something beautiful and something powerful and something that still resonates with me. And I feel if Occupy truly started to evolve and connecting with local struggles and coordinating with local struggles, we can have huge actions, we can raise consciousness, we can do positive things like what Occupy the Pipeline did with a bunch of different groups in terms of the whole fracking issue that's now been taken off the table by Cuomo.
You are listening to Occupy Wall Street Radio. This show airs on the great station WBAI. Samumba, you're a New Yorker. You have a history of listening to WBAI?
Of course, yes, definitely. WBAI.
We are in a fund drive. Are you familiar with that concept here?
Yes, definitely.
Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, this is a listener-supported radio station. That means if you are listening, it is your support that we are asking for. Go to your phones and call this number, 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602 is the number to call to keep this station alive. Any contribution you give will be really, really appreciated. In fact, if you give as little as just a little over $10 a month, there's this amazing premium that I've been talking about all month. It's a premium that's being offered in honor of Black History Month. Look at this collection of 5 CDs, 50 hours of Pacifica radio shows that they're offering. So that's 50 hours, $150 gets you that collection. You want to tell them about what you see there?
Yeah, I see a bunch of great pieces of information that I think that we need.
It's like a master's degree in Black American history here.
Everything from Dr. King to the Black Panthers, a letter from Birmingham jail from Dr. King. Definitely, these are pieces of history that we all need.
These are things you can listen to. These are voices that are aired on Pacifica Radio and that are preserved by Pacifica Radio and brought to you here locally by WBAI. This is New York City. It's really important that we have a free speech radio station. How important has it been to you to have access to WBAI as a listener, Samumba?
Well, it's one of the very few independent outlets of media and information in this city, and it's known worldwide. And I remember when I was working as a social worker, we used to listen to it throughout the day just to be aware of the struggles going on in the city at the time. There were struggles with labor, with all of the major labor unions, and WBAI was one of the voices.
It's a constant reminder that you're not alone. If you're someone working for social justice in this town, you are not alone. And let us know that we are not alone. Let Occupy Wall Street Radio know that we are not alone. And call and support this station and support this show. 516-620-3602. I realize if $120 is a little steep, you can contribute as little as $25, become a member of the station. I want to let you know another premium they offer. For $60 is a copy of the book, The New Jim Crow. This is the book by Michelle Alexander that came out last year. Its subtitle is Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. This is an amazing book that has really changed the way a lot of people see the world. It's a really brave and bold statement on the way things are. It's a call to action, just like WBAI is a call to action. If you are listening, you know how important it is that speech like this gets heard. You should also know that it's up to you to keep this station alive. As a listener, I urge you to call 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602. Samumba, we were talking a little bit about the evolution of Evolve and how it came out of the movement. It came out of the movement out of the need for you to give name to another effort. And that effort sounds like you really want the movement to evolve. You want that movement to evolve by engaging more and more people. Can you talk a little bit about the actions you're actually doing? I know you occupy the subways from time to time, and you are very resourceful and ambitious in what you're trying to accomplish. Tell us about ways that people can support and involve themselves in your efforts.
Well, a lot of times just come out. If you're listening to this, if you have a Facebook page, go to OCU Evolving or go to like our page, OCU Evolve. And yes, we do occupy the subway at least twice a month. We were doing it at one point every week, but we had to slow down because we're involving ourselves in so many activities right now, which include supporting the strike at Golden Farm. The workers are asking the public to boycott and form a picket line until they become a union at Golden Farm, which is in Kensington, Brooklyn.
Okay.
It's low wage, basically immigrant population, vulnerable population, but they have been certified to be a union by the National Labor Board, and right now we're close to a decision or a settlement in this case. So we're asking people to come out and support us in Kensington, Brooklyn.
And there's no doubt that showing up to actions like that, community response, actually makes a difference in the lives of those workers.
Definitely. Like Hot and Crusty is another example of a victory where the workers, had the public united with the public united with the workers, came out, formed picket lines, and we even occupied Hot and Crusty for a short time, and they have a contract now and they're unionized.
So if you join that Facebook page, you can find out about actions like that, where all you need to do is show up.
Right.
And it actually makes a difference.
Right.
And you get that experience of occupying, which Samumba has described as addictive, and I would have to say it is too.
Definitely.
I always go by this Francis Fox Piven quote of, the movement will change the individual much more than the other way around.
Yes, definitely. Also, let me just say quickly that OccuEvolve.wordpress.com is our website, and it will show you everything that we're doing. We also have a day of gratitude, Occupy Gratitude, which is October the 24th, and it's basically our 1 year, February 24th is actually our 1 year.
That may have already happened.
This may have already happened, but we are basically just saying thank you to all of the people that have donated and supported Occupy Wall Street in the past. And, we're going to continue working. We're also working with Occupy Sandy. We have an OccuEvolve in Staten Island that's led by Bill Johnson, who's a longtime activist and one of the first people at Occupy Wall Street. He does a march to highlight what's been going on in Staten Island with the Hurricane Sandy.
He marches around the island every year and has for a while anyway.
Yes.
And you're joining with him?
We join with him, at least once a month. He marches every Sunday, and it's basically like a walking tour to talk about issues, organize, and do outreach to the community.
And talk about making a connection to something that was already there. He's been at this a while.
Yes.
And he showed up at Occupy, no surprise, and it's been good to get to know him. You talked about some of the issues of this term POC, I hear it used more in Occupy than anywhere else.
Yes.
I'm not terribly comfortable with it.
Yeah.
People of color versus what? People of no color.
Yeah.
There are black Americans in this movement, right?
Yes.
But the profile of this movement, as it gets recently revealed, is, it's just a bunch of white people. What are some of the responses you've had to this discussion, some of which has just come up of late, suddenly? We're kind of really openly discussing it.
Well, media always needs a story, and they have bills to pay as well. So of course, if you want to talk about Occupy, one thing that may glare out is the issue of race and the issue of class, and that came out in some media lately. And it's true, we do have an issue with a lack of people of color and a lack of diversity, but it's not as pronounced as it seems, and no one's at Occupy saying you can't be here if you're LGBTQ or you're a person of color or a person of African descent or Latino. Nobody's ever said that. I think the issue that the media doesn't understand and those outside of it don't understand is that when we were created, we appealed to a certain sector of the population, occupying social protests, getting arrested, getting beat up by the police, taking over public space, doesn't always appeal to people of color, for lack of a better term, of African people, Latino people. That doesn't appeal to us because, we already are stopped and frisked. We already have this kind of bullseye when it comes to, like the police. And civil disobedience isn't always the most attractive feature to us. So, it was like, if I have an arrest record or if I had a bad experience with the police, why would I put myself in deeper harm's way, especially if I'm dealing with these life and death issues of just surviving every day. So more than anything, it was that keeps a lot of our people, or people, for lack of a better term, people of color, out of the movement. However, OccuEvolve was created to address those issues. Like, we really want the movement to be about the 99%, not just the 1% that you may, see at a usual march or protest.
So it doesn't have to stay that way, and it doesn't have to be viewed that way either.
No, it doesn't have to be, because this movement is for everybody, and you can create whatever group or be part of any group and, create your own paradigms. And we're about what works. We have anarchists in our group. We have African internationalists in our group. We have Democrats, Republicans, reformists in our group. But we always felt like the best thing to do is take out the best of whatever philosophy or ideology and use it.
Right.
And our culture, a lot of our culture is based on indigenous and African principles and culture and ethics. We're more about the community and the communal sharing than we are about autonomy. Like, there's no autonomy without a sense of community. So we really push that. In direct democracy, we practice this thing called consensual democracy, which means there are no winners or losers, which means, there is no 90% vote or, things where somebody's going to lose. Everybody wins. So we decide what the values are. We decide what the goals are together.
The goal doesn't have to be consensus. The goal is action.
The goal is action.
Consensus can be a process.
Right. And we believe still in consensus, but we call what we call consensual democracy, where there's no losers. Like, we'll work with any group in Occupy, even if we don't agree with them, because, we think that we all want the same thing anyway. So that's a little different than what they call direct democracy, because, as you mentioned before, there is a tyrannical aspect to horizontalism.
And it's also, you're really trying to create opportunities for people to be able to show up, to not have to give entire days or weeks, but be able to participate within their lifestyles and within their own efforts underway in social justice.
Right.
You're willing and able to latch onto other issues and amplify them. Samumba, thank you so much for coming in and discussing these issues with us. Thank you for listening to Occupy Wall Street Radio on WBAI 99.5 FM, New York. I want to thank our engineer, Michael G. Haskins, and our technical producer, Reggie Johnson. You can email this show at occupywallstreetradio@gmail.com. Visit this station's website, www.bai.org, to contribute. You can also hear archives of this show, but be sure to contribute. Be a listener who supports this station. Call 516-620-3602. There are awesome premiums, but the best premium of all is the survival of this station, WBAI. 516-620-3602. Free Speech Radio. Keep it going.